And from the very beginning, these restaurants become places where privileged men interact with sex workers.
You talk about Paris. So, how did Paris help shape this connection between dining and desire?
That's a great question. And it begins with the origins of the restaurant, which we tend to think about as a timeless institution, but really has a very recent modern history. So the first restaurants, as we understand them in the Western world, emerge in Paris in like the 1760s and 1770s. These are the first places where you would go, sit down at a table at your own time, like during opening hours, receive a menu, order a dish off the menu, eat at your own table, but in a public room with other people who are dining. So, this sort of establishment really doesn't exist in the West before Paris in the 1760s and 70s. And from the very beginning, these restaurants become places where privileged men interact with sex workers. And so the origin of the word restaurant, it refers to a restoring broth, which is like the initial dish served at these places. And what these restoring broth was supposed to restore was your libido. For sort of elite men at the time who were seen as being so fatigued by their great brains and mental energy that they would need basically bone broth to like renew their sexual vigor. And so men would go to these restaurants and there were private rooms in them. So you could eat in the public room, but you could also eat in a private room, which would have a door that locked and would typically have a couch or a bed, basically, along with the table. And they would meet with their mistresses and they would meet with sex workers. So the restaurant becomes associated with sexual indulgence. It's a place where you satisfy all your senses, the visual senses. They're decorated with mirrors and with gaslights, the sense of smell, because there's all these wonderful smells coming out of the kitchen. Obviously, the sense of taste, the sound of nice china and silver on china, and the noise of people dining around you, and your senses should you take it to a private room.
That is so fascinating. What a long journey. How we got to like our TGI Fridays and like from that.
Yeah. But I teach the history of food as well as the history of sexuality. And when I talk about how the restaurant becomes a site of sexuality and the emergence of waitressing in the mid 19th century, and waitressing is a Paris profession, so many of my students who have worked in the food industry get it right away.